Hello everyone. So today we are going to learn a new poem which is written by the well-known poet Robert Frost, and the poem is The Road Not Taken. Before we start the poem, let's have a look at the poem. The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them rarely about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. So, this is the poem, and if you have heard about the poet, you must be knowing that Robert Frost is known for his poems which depict the rural life. So, let's have a look at the poet Robert Frost. So, Robert Frost was born on the 26th of May 1874 in United States, and he passed away on 29 January 1963 United States. So some of the key points of the poet are given here. He was an American poet, as we already know, and most of his works were published in America. His poem that we are reading now, The Road Not Taken, was published in the year 1916. So the most important characteristic of his poems are that firstly his poems depicted the rural life, and the second is that mostly his poems were written in colloquial speech, which means that it was written in a manner where everyday words, where everyday language was used, the words that we use every day. It was not used in a very different manner from the usual poetry stuff. He wrote about rural life in New England in the early 20th century, where he used to examine the complex social and philosophical themes. Every simple thing was a symbol of something else. Some images like trees, birds, travelers usually became symbolic in his poems. Though at a glance, if you look at his poems, you will feel that it is a very simple poem. But when you look minutely, you will find that there is a deep meaning behind each and every line that he writes. He was influenced by the early romantic poets such as Keats, and his sentences are written with meter and rhythm, which increases the beauty of the poem and makes it more expressive. So, some of the well known poems of Robert Frost are Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, Mending Wall, Fire and Ice, and many others. So, since we have an idea of who Robert Frost is, let's move on to the poem, hoping that you will understand. The Road Not Taken. So, as I have already mentioned that the poem was published in 1916, let's look at the first few lines of the poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Now, if you look at the very first line, you will notice that he is highlighting the confusion that he is having at that moment. He is passing by, he is walking down the road during the autumn season because it is referred to as yellow wood. Now, yellow wood means generally the leaves which fall down in the season of autumn. So he is walking down this path and he's confused. Why is he confused? Because he is one lone traveler, he is one person, and he has to choose either of the two paths. He cannot choose both the paths because he can only travel on any one of the two. And he is sorry that he could not choose both the paths. Now he is trying to determine which path he has to select, which path he should go on. He should continue his travel on. So this word yellow refers to autumn, which means the leaves that fall down, and it is also symbolic of the people who have aged, who have grown old, who have already experienced life, who have already experienced and gained much of knowledge. Now, the narrator here, the traveler here, he's completely confused. So, he is trying to find out, he's trying to choose which path would be the best of it. So, he looks at the first one. Now, look at the next stanza, the second stanza. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. So he has already looked at the first one. He has looked at the first path and he sees that it has been bent in the undergrowth. Means there are no doubt there is grass everywhere, but because many travelers have passed by that road, many travelers have gone through that road, the grass has been walked upon. And when he looks at the other path, the second path, he sees that it is also grassy. It is just like the first one, but it wanted wear, means few travelers. It had been traveled less by people, and therefore it wanted wear, means it was needed to be used. Though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. So he says that he has looked at the first path and at the second path, and he feels that the other path has been traveled less. And now what does he do? Now look at the third stanza. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So finally he has made his decision. He has made his decision that he will choose the second path, because he feels that that path has been traveled less and he wants to choose it. He wants to know what is at the end of that path. And that's why he says, oh, I kept the first for another day. Now, after this line, you will see that there is a word yet. Yet knowing how way leads on to way. So he was fully aware that once he had chosen the path, once he had started walking on the path, he could not come back. He knew that even though he had kept the first for another day, he was well aware of the fact that it was difficult to return back. It was difficult to go to the starting point and restart. It was not easy. So he was doubting if he should ever come back, if he should have another chance in his life. So from this we get an idea that whenever in our life, if we compare to our life also, if we are not choosing the right path, it may lead to our downfall in future. And therefore whenever we are making choices in our life, we have to be very careful about what choices are we taking in our life, whether we are choosing the right thing or not, whether we are going through the right path or not. And let's look at the last stanza. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So you have noticed that in the first three stanzas, the poem has four stanzas. Now, in the first three stanzas, you have noticed that the narrator is showing no disappointment for his decision, nor any acknowledgement that such a decision might be life changing. The narrator is trying to tell, to say that when he will grow old, when he will gain all the experience, once he has maybe reached his goal by passing through that less chosen path, he will look back and he will tell everyone that many years ago there were two choices for me, there were two roads for me, and I chose the one which was less passed on, which was less trodden on. And that has made all the difference. And that is why whatever is happening with him is because of the choice that he has made. Now, if you look at the poem, you will notice that though the poet is talking about the woods, though the poet is talking about the two roads, he is actually referring to our life, to the choices that we make in our life. Don't we get many choices in our life? Don't we get many options in our life that we should go on this path, we should choose this path? There are many choices. At that time, we don't think much. We just choose whatever is pleasing to our ears or pleasing to our eyes. But later on, we realize that maybe we have done something wrong or maybe something right. So he is referring to the wood as a place and the roads and the two roads as choices. So, in a way, the poet is trying to tell us that life gives us chances, but we have to choose the right path so that we can be successful in life. And here, some people say that Robert Frost was more a traditional poet, though he was of the 19th century, but he was not very much influenced by the writers, by the poets of that century. Rather, he was influenced by the traditional poets. And if you read any of his poems, you will notice that he uh, uses the rhythm, the meter, according to the poets of the earlier times. And that is something that you will notice in most of his poems if you go through his poems. Now, this poem consists of four stanzas of 5 lines each. Each stanza has 5 lines, and if anyone asks you what is the rhyme scheme, if you remember, when we were in kindergarten, we used to read the nursery rhymes, we used to memorize the nursery rhymes, and it was always in a rhythmic manner. Always the last word would rhythm in such a manner that it would appear to be like a song. So here the rhyming scheme, if anyone asks you, you can tell it as A B A A B. Now what is A B A A B? So just look at the last words of the first stanza. When you look at wood, the first line, yellow wood, wood is resembling stood and could. So we are referring to it as A, A, and A. While the second line, last word both, and the fifth line, last word growth, are resembling each other, are rhyming with each other. That's why B is put for both and growth. And that's how we put the rhyme scheme as A B A A B. So I hope you have understood the poem, and now I have listed some new words which you will find in the poem. These are the few words which you can go through. You will find these words in the poem. These are new words. I want you to go through it so that you can understand the poem in a much better manner. After this, there are a few questions which I have made, and one part is having 8 marks question and the other part is having 2 marks questions. So for the 8 marks questions, I would recommend you to write the answers in 100 and 150 words, and for the 2 marks questions, I would recommend you to write in 30 words. It has been given in such a manner so that you can write it according to the question pattern that will be coming in your exams. So for further queries, you can ask. So I hope you have understood the lesson, understood the poem, and thank you.